to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network, your home for the anti-establishment movement. As you can tell, once again, I am not Chris McDaniel. Chris is away this week, so I'm back in his seat this week trying to see if maybe this will be another week of the incredibly sinking chair like he had last week. So we'll see if I can avoid that fate. But as always, when Chris is not here, I am with my own Joan Rivers, as he likes to call himself, Jim Cegelski. Jim, welcome back.
Jack, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for asking again.
It's always fun, and of course, Chris has that busy schedule, so I mean, a lot of times he's just not going to be able to be here, but he hates it and he doesn't want us to miss a show, so that's why he says let's roll anyway.
Yeah, we'll put up some sort of mediocre show to replace him, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure everybody has noticed everything that has happened in this presidential race over the last several weeks. I mean, we've seen the ups and downs. I mean, it went from it was a sure thing for Trump when Joe Biden and he had that debate to Kamala Harris coming in and gaining all this momentum. She was fresh. She was a new face. She had all the momentum in the world, and it felt like that maybe she might be able to sneak in and steal this thing from him. If you notice, they were kind of keeping her sheltered. She still hasn't done a press conference. I think it's been 81 days since she's became the nominee, or since she was announced she was going to be the nominee. She's not done a press conference yet, but she started doing interviews, and we'll talk about those in a second. But if you remember, she had the Democrat National Convention. She didn't do horrible in her speech. She was just okay, which seemed like it might have been enough for them. Then they had the debate between her and Trump, and unfortunately, Trump fell for the tricks and went down the rabbit holes they wanted to. It wasn't so much that she beat Donald Trump in that debate, it was just that Donald Trump followed the path that they laid. They laid out those breadcrumbs. He went down the wrong path in those. So again, she was gaining momentum. Everything they were telling us was she was going to win this thing. Then we started to see cracks. The second she started doing these TV interviews, we started to see different sides of her, sides that you and I had already seen and already told folks to, hey, just wait. At some point, she's going to let you know who she is. Well, she's starting to let everybody know who she is. And then, of course, you have the administration and their fumbling of these hurricane responses. I know you've seen the FEMA director come out and say that they don't have enough funds to get through the hurricane season, which is absurd to me considering how much money we have for everybody else in the rest of the world, but we can't take care of our own citizens. It just, to me, we're starting to see a comedy of errors here, and all of this is leading up to the worst possible timing for Kamala Harris. So today we're going to ask the question, has momentum that she once had, and I think you and I can both admit, when she first came on the scene, she had momentum. Whether we liked it or not, she had momentum. Has she not only killed that momentum, but reversed it back into Team Trump? And based on a lot of the things that I'm going to get into today, we're going to answer that question for you. But Jim, first off, you've been watching, I know you're like me, you're a glutton for punishment. You're going to sit down and watch these interviews. Have you seen, especially this week, seems to be probably her worst week ever. Have you watched any of the interviews she's put out this week?
I've watched almost all of them, and I have to tell you, the difference is she's not reading a teleprompter.
Yeah.
She's proven she can read a teleprompter. She's also now proven she can't speak without it because she is pathetic. Like, it comes across as one of the, I mean, I've said this before, she's one of the dumber politicians we have in Washington, D.C. The word salad stuff that she gives on every answer, the 60 Minutes interview where he was asking about immigration, he had to ask the same question 3 times, and she never answered the question. No. I mean, that stuff's got to come back to haunt you. If you're an undecided voter, and I can't believe there's still undecided voters out there, actually, but if you are and you're now watching her speak, they should have stuck with the strategy of keeping her hidden.
It was working. I mean, when she wasn't seen,
Yeah,
it
because
looked like
because the media was covering for her every second. The only reason how somebody who's been the vice president for 3 years be the new fresh face? Well, that's the media. Propaganda is what it is, because she's not a fresh face
we're
at all.
going to get to that here in a second.
You know, the best thing she's done for Donald Trump is to actually start speaking during interviews. Even softball interviews, she can't handle.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with the 60 Minutes interview, because again, if you've watched that 60 Minutes interview, she wasn't the sharp, well-prepared that, you know, she's been in other interviews. Although they gave, if you've paid attention, CBS did try to help her.
Oh, yeah.
Because they aired one promo that showed a different answer. I think the question was on Israel, and she went into one of her patented word salads. But then on the broadcast, she gave a concise and coherent answer to the question. So they went back and edited the interview. They allowed her a do-over. But whoever put together the promo apparently wasn't smart enough to realize that that wasn't what was in the interview.
Right.
So they've been caught doing this. So that's a disaster for her right there, and the fact that they had to. But then, even with their help, you talked about it a second ago. When they asked her the question on the border, she fumbled it so bad, refused to answer the question. It was atrocious. I mean, that's the best way to say it. She would not answer the question. She kept going back to we want to fix a problem, not run on a problem. And that's not an answer. The question was simply, okay, you've done something in your final year that seems to be working, that seems to be cutting the flow of illegal immigrants in this country. Yet, for 3 years, you didn't do that. Do you think it was a mistake not to do that? Instead, she kept going to, we're trying to fix a problem, not run on a problem. Well, for 3 years, you weren't worried about fixing a problem. Apparently, in election years, when you decided, we'll fix a problem. So that doesn't give us a lot of faith or encouragement that whatever you've done to curb it for now is going to continue. Not to mention the fact that when you look at the way that they have already allowed an influx of so many illegals in this country, yes, we need to stop the flow. But I don't think they have any idea or any plan to try to remove the illegals who are already here.
I don't think they have any intention of stopping the flow, Jack, to be perfectly honest with you. I think things are going to remain exactly the same. And speaking of her interviews, I saw at least 5 interviews where they ask her how she's going to fix the economy, what she's going to do about the economy. Well, her answer in every one of those interviews is, I grew up middle class and I love small business.
And she didn't grow up.
But it has nothing to do with fixing the economy. There's not one single plan that she puts out there about fixing the economy. Growing up middle class and loving small businesses, which, by the way, I own a small business. She does not love small business.
No.
She's done nothing to help small business and has no plan to help small business. She keeps putting out there, we're going to give a bunch of money to people who are going to start small businesses. That's not helping small business. That's actually going to take more tax dollars from small businesses to give to other people.
Absolutely it is. And let's talk for a second again. We're going to get back to her bad week, but you brought up the fact that she always loves to say she's grew up middle class. I grew up middle class. That's her answer every time. She can relate to you because she grew up middle class. She never grew up middle class. I did an entire episode of The Right Side where I broke down her true background. And if you look at the neighborhoods that she lived in, they were not middle class neighborhoods. Now, I have no problem with somebody growing up with a little bit of wealth. I don't hate you for it. But don't try to lie to us and tell us that you can relate to us when you are 100% phony. And that's what she is. Because it doesn't take much to do the research to realize that she's lying about that. So again, it's a terrible answer in the first place, but it's also a lie.
I tell you, it bothers me more that that's her plan to fix the economy is her growing up middle class. I mean, that really bothers me because she has absolutely not given one plan whatsoever on how she's going to help America get out from underneath paying outrageous costs for groceries, gas, everything else. I mean, a smart person would say, "Listen, I'm gonna open up pipelines. I'm gonna start drilling for oil." It's what Trump says, and I'm surprised she hasn't stolen it, because she's flip flopped on a lot of stuff and started to try to claim she's going to take Trump's.
I heard they're going to release a blue "Make America Great" hat soon.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I would not doubt it at all.
Well, we go from the bad 60 Minutes interview, which again wasn't a great look for it, but it's something maybe you can pivot from, especially with their help. Maybe you can get out of. She goes on The View. Now remember, you just said it a second ago, Jim. This is a woman that is running as the candidate of change. She's going to be the one, day one, she's going to change the direction of the country. She said on The View that she was involved in every major decision that Joe Biden made. She said on The View that she wouldn't change anything. She would make those same decisions. So again, and we talked about this last time you and I were on the show, explain to me again how she's an agent of change when she goes on television and admits to the public she wouldn't change a single thing. And it's funny because if you recall, she says, "I'm not Joe Biden." She said that during the debate, if you remember. "I'm not Joe Biden," when Trump tried to tie her to Joe Biden. That's one of the things I think J.D. Vance did really well in his debate, was he didn't mention Joe Biden. He kept saying the Harris administration. He tied everything to her, which is what they've needed to do since day one. You run on the issues, this is a very winnable race. You go off into the weeds about crowd sizes and stuff like that, then you give them what they want. So it seems like the messaging's getting back on point, not just for Vance, but for Trump, because I've watched him in some of his rallies. He seems to be energized.
I actually think he's learned from Vance. I mean, I wish Vance would have sat Trump down and gave him a lesson on how to debate before Trump took on Harris, because what Vance did against Waltz was brilliant.
Masterclass.
I don't actually think I've ever seen anyone win a debate like that before. Like, he didn't make a mistake. No. I mean, it was perfect.
Yeah. And Walz was terrible.
And boy, I'll tell you what, I came away from that debate thinking, MAGA, if Trump can win, MAGA has a great future with J.D. Vance.
He was impressive.
I think he's incredibly impressive, incredibly bright. I wrote this week as, normally, a writer isn't a very good speaker, but he actually proved that he's a better speaker than he is a writer.
He was impressive that night. And I think you can maybe trace back to that as the beginning of the shift. Vice president debates, we can both agree, they usually don't matter. I mean, because they never in the past have truly moved the needle. It's the undercard debate. Most people aren't paying attention. In this instance, it feels like some were. But I don't know that it would have been enough to flip the script. But you had a couple of things that happened. First, Hurricane Helene comes through, creates the chaos that it did, and it feels like the response from the federal government has been lacking, to say the best. Kamala Harris, who for the longest time had been trying to paint herself as someone distant from Joe Biden, then in turn goes on The View and says she wouldn't do anything different, and that, yes, she was involved in every major decision. Plain and simple. We're starting to see that her original strategy is being thrown out the window, and she's going down the path they didn't want her to go down. We're starting to understand why they didn't want her on these interviews in the first place.
Let me ask you this, Jack. Do you think she's doing these interviews because the Democrats know she's behind?
I think there's part of that.
Because why did they change the strategy so dramatically right the last month here?
I think there's part of that. I think there was a growing criticism about her not doing the interviews. Even James Carville today came out and said she needs to hold a press conference. She needs to just get out there and own everything, I think is the way how he worded it. So you've got Democrat insiders who are trying to tell her that she needs to do more. She needs to be out in front of us.
I hope she takes that advice. It would be the best gift Trump has given if she does a press conference and gets asked real questions. Let Peter Ducey from Fox News interview this woman. I'm telling you, she will not be able to answer a single question.
Well, if she's going to be the leader of the free world, she's going to have to, at some point, face the media. At some point, she's going to have to stand there and talk to the media, something she's not been able to do. Now, of course, thoughts and prayers again with Florida, because they just got hit with another hurricane in Hurricane Milton. And I think Governor DeSantis has done a good job having to, in 2 weeks' time, have to face back-to-back storms.
Best governor in the United States.
I agree.
Is absolutely. And by the way, we have a viewer from Tampa watching us right now. My mom lives right outside of Tampa.
Really?
And she had power back last night. She lost it and got it back last night already. Wow. So Governor DeSantis is to me.
We got lucky, too, that storm broke up right before it hit. Now, it still caused a lot of damage. It spun off several tornadoes, but it wasn't a Cat 5 like they were telling us it might be. Instead of, 15-foot storm surge, you got 4-foot storm surge is what they're reporting now. So again, still bad, not downplaying it, because a Category 3 is still a rough hurricane. But thank God that he heard our prayers and that he did not unleash the full force of that hurricane upon the state of Florida. But one of the things that happened in the lead up to Milton, Harris started complaining that DeSantis wasn't taking her call, that DeSantis wasn't willing to talk to her. She accused Ron DeSantis of using the hurricane to play politics. DeSantis, of course, was just trying to lead his people. And you know who disagreed with Kamala Harris that Ron DeSantis was just playing politics? Joe Biden. Joe Biden came out and contradicted Kamala Harris and said, no, me and Governor DeSantis have talked multiple times and he's doing a great job down there. So Joe Biden pointed out who was actually trying to play politics with this hurricane. Her own buddy has thrown her under the bus on this issue.
Well, I was going to ask you that. There's a train of thought that Joe Biden has turned on Kamala Harris. He gave a press conference recently while she was out on the stump and started talking about how involved she was in every decision that he made. So do you think Joe Biden has turned on Kamala Harris? Because there's got to be some bad blood there, let's face it. I mean, he got thrown under the bus by her and a lot of other Democrats.
A few weeks ago, I did an episode of The Right Side. It may have been a month or so back. I did an episode of The Right Side that I think I titled The Bitter Biden. And I talked about, because there were insiders at the time that were saying Joe Biden was not happy with Kamala Harris, that he does feel like he was blindsided. He does feel like that she played a part in his removal from the campaign. According to the same report, they said that the biggest person that he was mad at was Barack Obama, which was kind of telling, because if you noticed the convention, Joe Biden was gone before the Obamas got there. He came in night one, did his thing. They got
rid of Biden so fast it wasn't funny.
And I think we thought at the time that they got rid of Biden. Biden may not have wanted to stick around. He may have saw the same thing we did and was like, I can only put up this fake act of thank you, Joe, that y'all are doing and pretend I'm not mad at you for so long. I think the great quote from the movie Tombstone is, my hypocrisy only goes so far. Maybe that's what got to Joe Biden right there. His hypocrisy could only go so far, and he had to get out of there. So again, yes, I do think that there is a rift there. I think Joe Biden has tried his best to ignore the rift, but he's only human. And at some point, especially when you're watching her fail anyway, he doesn't want to be the reason she failed, so he's going to try to go ahead and point out her mistakes himself in this instance when it comes to.
Well, there's got to be a little bit of both Joe and Jill thinking that Kamala failing kind of would, make Joe look a little bit better. I mean, they're going to do a little. Well, why'd you get rid of me? You picked another loser. So I think there's more bitterness there, especially on Jill's part, than we actually can imagine. And I wouldn't doubt if they continue to sabotage her.
It feels that way. I mean, it really does feel like they are not happy in the slightest with what she's doing, And yeah, I do think you're right that they're, even though they don't like Trump, and I think it's obvious that Joe Biden does not like Donald Trump, I think that there is some truth to the fact that maybe they'll feel a little better if she fails. Be like, see, it wasn't us.
All right.
So that's human nature. I mean, that's anybody in that role. If you feel like you had worked so hard, and
let's say it, Joe's not a stand-up guy to begin with.
No.
So
No.
being vindictive, I think that fits right into Joe's character.
I think you're right. I think that does fit into Joe's character because he's shown before he can play that vindictive game. We've seen him be petty in the past. So, I mean, that's not outside.
He's turned the government against his political opponent. I mean, how vindictive can you be? So, I can definitely see Joe, stabbing Kamala in the back, just same as Kamala stabbed Joe in the back.
And it's fascinating to watch in real time. It's like a real life soap opera.
It's fascinating, but I got to tell you, Jack, these last 3-4 weeks are frightening. I'm starting to just frightened of what happens to this country if this election goes bad.
Let's finish Harris's bad week before we have to take a break. I think we're about 10 minutes away from a break, so I want to talk for a second too, because Harris didn't just stop at 60 Minutes in The View. She then went on Howard Stern. And of course, Howard Stern didn't ask any hard-hitting questions. I think at one point he asked her, "Did you ever listen to Prince or something like that?"
It was embarrassment. It's embarrassing. Howard Stern used to be a really good interviewer, used to be a very good entertainer, used to be somebody who actually represented the working class. He's become this elitist, just pathetic creature, and I wish people would stop listening to him.
He used to be an anti-authority person. He used to stand up to those, and now, especially if you look at how he's a slave to COVID mandates and attacked anybody that didn't agree with COVID mandates, he is now just a pawn of the government, essentially.
And pathetic. He really is pathetic.
I 100% agree. And of course, he went on there. But then he said something, and I don't know if you saw it yet, but he said something on the show where he was talking about, voting for her. And he said, "I'll vote for a wall over Donald Trump." Is that a ringing endorsement of Kamala Harris to say that, to compare her, voting for her is comparable to voting to that wall over there?
But you know as well as I do, that's what most people, they'll vote for anybody over Donald. This is all about Trump and anti-Trump. It didn't have anything to do with Joe Biden back in 2020, and it has nothing to do with Kamala Harris in 2024. The vote for Kamala Harris is all anti-Trump.
Yeah. Well, of course, she didn't stop there. She, of course, had to go on the other liberal darling show, the Stephen Colbert show, which, again, I don't get the appeal. I don't find him funny.
No.
I mean, maybe he would be if he would just stick to comedy and not act like he's a
his comedy is drinking a beer with her.
And that's what I was going to get to. That was one of the cringiest things I've seen, where they just decide, hey, look, I'm going to show you how much of an everyday person I am. Because it wasn't just a beer. It was, a Miller High Light?
Yeah.
I'm surprised it wasn't a Bud Light.
And she had to read the can to even have a line of, she read the champagne of beers, but she had to read it. This is her teleprompter moment, drinking a beer.
I mean, this is what we've come to. This is the best that they had to offer. They were better off with Joe. I mean, if this is the best they have, I think the American people, not saying that I would have wanted to see a second term of Joe, I think the American people, assuming she won somehow, would be better off with Joe Biden than her. Not by much, but would be. But she went further because, again, her bad week didn't just stop there. She was having a meeting of some sorts with government officials. Biden was on the meeting as well, but he was there, and he had everybody else that wasn't in the Oval Office on a remote, and she's live streaming during this. And of course, during the discussion, somebody comes up to her and she's like, "We're live." She mumbles it, where it's shown to everybody that's watching this video. In addition to that, she gave a speech in which it was a video speech where she was giving her thoughts to the people of Florida. Now, you said she can read a teleprompter, and we've seen evidence that she can read a teleprompter. I'm not so convinced she can read as well off of a sheet of paper because she was terrible on that. I read her speech on the latest episode of The Right Side. I think I delivered it far better than she did. But again, it goes back to this image that they had painted of her as this everyday person. She's one of us, blue collar. She's middle class, as she likes to try to tell everybody. They've gone out of their way to try to paint Kamala Harris with a different stroke than what she is. And now we're starting to see that she's not necessarily who they told us she was. They kept her hidden away from all these interviews. They kept her hidden away from everything that would have tipped us off on who she truly was. Well, now that we're starting to see, I think you're starting to see that shift more and more, because you're seeing mistakes like getting into a fight with Ron DeSantis while another storm is about to hit his state. That's a mistake. Not making sure that Joe Biden is on board with you on that, that's another mistake. Going into these interviews underprepared and saying things that your campaign has tried as hard as they can to keep you from saying, like, I wouldn't do anything different than Joe Biden, that's a mistake. I do think her campaign thinks that her having a beer with Stephen Colbert will endear her to the American people. But it doesn't when you have to look at the can and go, the champagne of beers. You're not endearing yourself to anyone with that. No. And it's a colossal mistake, and it's opening the door. And Jim, I know you, like I said, you've watched every single one of them. You've seen the video that I was talking about. You've seen the speech that I talked about. If you were an undecided, which you're not, how much confidence would you have in her?
Absolutely none. Listen, I don't think anybody has any confidence in Kamala Harris. I don't think the people who are voting for her have confidence in Kamala Harris. There is this Trump derangement syndrome out there that some people just can't get over, and they'll vote for anybody, including Kamala Harris. But that doesn't mean they think Kamala Harris is going to do a good job for the country. What I don't think they understand is just how dangerous Kamala Harris is when she is going to be. If she gets into office, how dangerous she's going to be, because, Tim Walz just came out and said they want to end the Electoral College. They want to stack the Supreme Court. If I'm jumping ahead, I'm jumping ahead.
You're not, because I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a good one to bring up before we go to the break anyway. Yes, Tim Walz came out and said they want to do away with the Electoral College. He was alongside other liberal darlings like Gavin Newsom from California. Of course they want to do away with it because, again, the Electoral College is the reason they can't win. They don't understand why it exists, because we don't want New York and California to decide every election. Right. We want everyone to have a voice, not just the mass population cities that would decide every election moving forward. But I don't know if you saw this yet. Kamala Harris's campaign has come out and said that they're not in favor of abolishing. So they're already walking back what Tim Walz just said a day or two ago. Here they are, already in damage control, trying to walk away from that statement. Now, whether or not we believe her when she says that she doesn't want to do away with the Electoral College, that's a different discussion. But again, that's another bad look for this campaign, because you've got your running mate, the person who has been your go-to, because let's face it, as terrible as Walz is coming across, he's a better talker than her for the most part. And now you're contradicting him. It's just not a good look for them. And when we get back from this break, I think we'll talk for a second about some other signs that they might be on the downturn right now, because they might have some internal polling out there that is leading them to believe that Kamala Harris is not leading in these polls, and maybe even getting ready to cost them Senate seats as well.
Oh, I hope you're right.
Let's pause here for this break.
resort.
All right, guys, welcome back here to Chris McDaniel's America. And we're talking about Kamala Harris. Again, we were talking about the fact that when this started under her, she had tremendous momentum. She seemed like she might be a runaway freight train. It had a lot of us that did not want to see her win, that understood how dangerous her and Tim Walz would be. It had us a little afraid, Jim. I think you and I talked about it last time we were on, that there was a lot of fear about what might be coming down the pipeline from Kamala Harris if she is elected. Well, it just came out today, again, because remember, they're talking about how great the economy is, that Bidenomics is working. Inflation rose another 2.4% in the month of September, above expectations. Again, another bad bit for Kamala Harris, because their entire thing that they're trying to tell us is that this is the team that is going to get us on the other side of it. You saw it during both debates where they tried to blame Donald Trump and his leadership during COVID as the whole reason why we were in this mess in the first place. Well, now we're seeing that despite all the media's best efforts to tell us the economy was improving, we were on the upswing, we were not, because the inflation went up another 2%. You've got Americans out there that are struggling to get by right now, myself included. You know, going to the grocery store, I used to could do it on a pretty good budget. That budget's thrown out the window now. You know, I'm having to say, okay, instead of eating this, I need to put that back and get this instead and try to figure out a way to make it last longer, because it's just unmanageable for those of us who are truly middle class, or maybe even a scale below middle class. It's very hard for us to get by. Kamala Harris tells us that everything's okay. The economy is the winning issue here, and when you see stuff like this and you see that the economy, that we are seeing the inflation continue to rise another 2%, that is not good news for the Kamala Harris campaign at all.
Yeah, and listen, what blows my mind is why this election's even close at all, because all of us are suffering. I mean, we definitely don't have as much money as we had 4 years ago, and the prices continue to skyrocket. Nothing has improved. I mean, as much as the media wants us to believe that things are getting better, all we have to do is believe our own eyes. You know, we see what the grocery tab comes to each week, and it's just shocking. So yeah, nothing's better, and nothing's going to get better. I still think inflation's the number one issue, but for some reason, there's just way too many people in this country who are willing to shoot themselves in the foot to make sure Trump doesn't get this election.
And there are, and I think you called it before in the last segment where you referred to it as Trump derangement syndrome. There's a lot of that. There are some people out there that just, for whatever reason, they don't like him. There are people out there that follow the tribalism camp and would never vote for a Republican, period. The key is to outnumber them. And when you look at news coming out where top Democrat operatives are coming out and saying they're worrying that the blue wall is slipping away from Kamala Harris. Apparently, there has been some internal polling that some Democrats are starting to leak out that the Harris campaign has gotten it, and it's not favorable for them. They're starting to fear that her campaign, her chances are slipping. Remember, 2 weeks ago, they felt great. They felt like they hit a home run with that debate. They felt that was the game changer. I remember saying at the time that why I didn't think Trump did well. I didn't think it was going to move the needle because I didn't think she did stellar either. I thought it was probably at best a push. Even though I was disappointed in how Trump performed that night, I didn't think she elevated herself at all that night. And now we're starting to see more and more of that, where they're looking at different states and they're talking about them, and you see where Trump went to back to Pennsylvania. He is campaigning there. These key swing states are going to be the deciding factor of this race. We've known that for a while.
I think Butler, Pennsylvania, going back there was huge.
I do too.
I think that was a momentum push towards Trump that probably isn't in the polling yet. Elon Musk coming out to campaign for Donald Trump, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's a man who was a Democrat and is now out there, telling the truth about the bleak future we have. Freedom of speech is on the line. Freedom, the Second Amendment's on the line, and that man going out there and with the audience he has, I think that's the reason the momentum's shifting, Jack.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's news that's coming out that the Democrat running for Senate in Michigan warned donors that her internal polling showed Harris was underwater in Michigan.
Yeah, they're worried about Harris pulling her down.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why they're worried about it too, is because she's losing the union support in Michigan. That's always been a key dynamic for the Democrats. They've always been able to, and she's losing that support there in Michigan. In Wisconsin, they moved the re-election race for the Democrat senator there. They moved it away from lean Democrat to Tulsa. So you're seeing right here, in effect, you're seeing the swing where instead of the Democrats having this easy go, and that is not uncommon, as you know, in a presidential race, that if the state that has leaned one way, if they move towards the other party's candidate and there's a Senate race on the ballot, that could be good things for the other party in that race as well, in the Senate race. So it's not outside of precedent. And the fact that the Democrats are sending out these type of emails, the fact that they are warning their supporters that they're seeing Kamala Harris's support dwindle, to me is a little telling. I've been a part of campaigns. I've seen internal polling. I've seen things like this. And I understand these are things, especially if you get bad poll numbers that aren't going your guys' way. Internal polling most of the time is a little bit more skewed anyway. So if you've got skewed polling and you're still not getting what you want to see, that's a bad sign for her. So they're definitely feeling the danger. So they're going to ramp up more interviews with her, I think, which I think is only going to help based on what we saw this week. It's only going to help Donald Trump. It's not going to help her. Because what we've seen this week is just a failure to connect. What we've seen this week is Sesame Street Harris, as I've called her in the past, based on other interviews I'd seen her give as vice president. You're starting to see Sesame Street Harris come back.
I hope she continues to give interviews. I really do. I do think that's helping the Trump momentum. And Jack, I love your optimism here. But one thing, you brought up the hurricanes earlier, and there's a concern with Hurricane Helene that some of the people that were affected by that hurricane in Georgia and North Carolina, heavily Republican districts, and there's a concern that those people won't get the vote. Do you think that could come back and hurt Trump?
I don't, because I think that those are the very people that will find a way and be motivated to vote. I think those people are the ones that are feeling the pain at the most, and they'll figure out a way to get to the ballot box. Things like that seem to motivate you more than others, especially if you've experienced government inefficiency at its finest.
That is what true. We're seeing. These are the people that have to be thinking, heck, they can send $125 million to Lebanon, but I get $750.
Well, that's the other thing that Harris did that was another mistake for her, because again, they announce on the same day, we're going to send $150 million to the hurricane victims. $150 million. Then later that day, they announced they're going to send more than that to Lebanon.
Yeah.
Again, do they not understand what they're doing? And again, I blame both Democrats and Republicans for all the money going overseas, because again, who controls the House?
I agree with you.
The Republicans. So I don't give Speaker Johnson a pass at all on that, and I just want to be clear on that. But right now we're talking about the optics, and the optics that she gave to, on the same day, announce $150 million going to hurricane relief. Oh, you know what? We're going to give $175 million to Lebanon. You're not even going to wait a week before you would make the Lebanon, and you're going to make it the same day and make those people true American citizens who actually paid taxes, paid into the system. You're going to make them feel insignificant because that's what she did. And again, that's a campaign ad. If Team Trump's listening, that's a campaign ad you can put out there right now and expose them because they did it. They didn't wait a week apart. They didn't wait a month apart.
Well,
they did it the same day.
Listen, Trump has done a great job with the hurricanes, hurricane victims. He was out there on the front lines. Elon Musk was putting up Starlink. Trump was doing more to help than our federal government was, which, good for him. Great job for him. He's out there talking to victims. He was doing a great job. And it's not just the hurricane thing they screwed up. If you think about it, remember back there was a rail crash in Ohio, I believe, that spread dangerous poisons all over, and they didn't respond to that either. So there's a problem with FEMA in general under the Democrats, and I don't know if it's because FEMA money is going to immigrants instead of where it's supposed to go or what, but I do think this could come back and bite them.
Well, there's no denying that they gave FEMA money to immigrants. They tried to deny it, and the media tried to come out and say, well, Trump put out a lie. But then you can go back to 2022, and you can find the White House's own press secretary saying that they were giving FEMA money to immigrants. You found it. They did it. After they got exposed that they weren't telling the truth when they tried to say they didn't do it, after that audio came out and it exposed them, they changed their story. They started to say, well, those funds came from a different spot at FEMA. They instantly pivoted away from the, no, we didn't give migrants FEMA money. No, we did, but that's different money. If it's money...
It's all American taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
We do know that.
And FEMA is supposed to be there to help American citizens in the event of a disaster like we've had the last 2 weeks.
Right. This is the reason for FEMA. So
again, that's another black eye for this administration. Again, an administration that, in her own words, she wouldn't do anything different. Right. Words matter. She said it. The other mistake I think that they continue to make, and I've seen others come out and say this, people on the left, I think James Carville was one of the ones who also said it, they keep bringing up January 6th. At the end of the vice presidential debate, that question has been asked 1,000 times. I don't understand why it was still a part of the debate, other than they felt that was their moment. They could catch J.D. Vance slipping. That was the only reason they had that in there. Right. But a lot of Democrats are saying that that's not polling well. American citizens don't care about January 6th anymore. They care about the economy. They care about these disasters. They care about these things. But the Democrats, the Harris campaign, continues to be stuck in the mud and continues to go back to January 6th because they think that is going to be their end-all, be-all smoking gun. Absolutely. That is going to help them. And so far, it's turning people away from them because they're tired of it. I hope that's the case because I've talked numerous times about how we fall too often for too many distractions, and maybe we're finally getting away from that.
Yeah, I agree. The January 6th thing has been pushed because they want their people to believe that Donald Trump is the threat to democracy. That's all. That's their number one camp outside of abortion. It's abortion and threat to democracy. That's all they have. In the meantime, people are starving to death, can't afford groceries, can't buy gas. Immigrants are flooding over our border. Those are the real issues. And if people really care about this country, they're going to vote based on those two issues, inflation and immigration, not abortion and the threat to democracy, which is totally made up.
Well, there's also been more news come out where a CNN network contributor, Scott Jennings, he went after Kamala Harris. Again, CNN, not a conservative network by any stretch of the imagination. He actually went after her for criticizing Ron DeSantis amid Hurricane Milton's track on the coast. Jennings went as far as calling Harris's move a big campaign mistake, noting Harris's comments contradicted President Joe Biden about the Florida governor. The same thing we were just talking about. Again, those of you that watch us and say, well, y'all are just biased, y'all are conservative. We are biased. We admit our bias, unlike multiple other members of the media. I have no problem admitting I have a bias here, but I also use logic and reason to come up with my opinions. It sounds to me like this Jennings guy, he is using logic and reason because he's saying the same thing that we're saying. And I don't think that you can call him a staunch conservative. I don't think you can say that his bias leans our way as well. But he goes straight after her. And let me read something. He said, in all of your public communications, no matter what you're doing, you have to always show the American people that you have their fellow citizens in your heart. I mean, this is the kind of historic storm that some people aren't going to survive it. There's going to be widespread property devastation. You have to just show the empathy that people would expect out of the American president. I think that's the campaign communications number one. So number two, what she can't do is try to insert politics into this. And I think, honestly, when Kamala Harris attacked Ron DeSantis as he was preparing for this hurricane, that was a huge campaign mistake for her. She should have not done that. Biden came out and corrected the record, saying that he and DeSantis are working together, and that was the proper response. Again, not a right-leaning reporter here saying the exact same thing that we were saying. It is a comedy of error at this point of the things that they are doing, of the mistakes they are making. Is the momentum starting to shift towards Donald Trump? It definitely feels that way. I'm not going to sit here right now, Jim, and say that Donald Trump is going to win 100% on November.
I will say Donald Trump will get more votes than Kamala Harris. Now, whether he wins or not is another question, but he will get more votes.
I see what you did there. But what I do think, because again, campaigns are all about momentum. And you can peak too soon. That was our concern when they dumped Joe Biden, that Trump had peaked too soon after the assassination attempt. The first assassination attempt, because of course there's been a second one since then. And I think that that was a legitimate concern. It wouldn't have been if Joe Biden had stayed in the race. I think the race would have been over.
Are you saying that Trump should have held back on his assassination attempt till later?
Oh, sure, yeah. No. But no, what I'm saying is when he had that peak, the Democrats did the only thing they could to counter that peak, which was pivot away from Biden, bring in a younger person who might have more charisma than Joe Biden, which she does have more charisma than Joe Biden. But again, to Howard Stern's point, I think that wall does too.
Yeah.
So watching this unfold, she got that momentum. But then there were questions was she peaking too soon? Was she peaking too soon? I think we're starting to get the answer to that question was yes, she peaked too soon. And now that people are starting to see her, they're starting to understand why she was so sheltered. They're starting to understand why the media didn't push more for interviews. And now I'm starting to hear everyday people who I don't think follow politics like we do, who are asking questions like, why didn't she ever do a press conference? Why hadn't she ever sat down in front of the media? Isn't she going to have to do that if she's elected president? I'm hearing citizens that don't normally ask those type questions. And to me, that's a very good sign. It's a very good sign to see that this is shifting. Now, campaigns have peaks and valleys. If something crazy happens or, Trump or Vance says something ridiculous, the scales can always tip back. We know how this works. We have seen this. That's why neither one of us will come out and say that Trump's going to win the race, because we're still far enough away from this election to where, as you said earlier, you're uneasy. You're going to be uneasy for the next 3 weeks. I'm going to be uneasy
till election night and they announce Trump as the winner, to be honest with you, Jack, because I don't put anything past our government. I don't put anything past the Democrat Party. There could still be an October surprise out there waiting for us. There could be ballot dumps in the middle of the night waiting for us like there was in 2020. I think everyone should be uneasy about this. And that's why the best thing we can do is make sure we overwhelm the ballot box on November 5th and don't give them a chance to steal this election like they did in 2020.
Now you're not trying to say that, liberals and Democrats are unstable sometimes the way they think. You wouldn't imply that, right?
Well, I wouldn't imply that, Jack, but I do have a question for you. Why is it only Democrats who are against voter ID?
Because it might hurt their chances of getting elected.
And why would that hurt their chances of getting elected?
Because they take advantage of the fraud.
Yeah.
And
I think that's all anyone needs to know. And if you're a Democrat and you're okay with the fact, or you're against voter ID, ask yourself why. Because you don't believe in free and fair elections. That's the only reason.
You have to have an ID to drive a car. You have to have an ID to go to certain establishments. You have to have an ID. If you're paying with a credit card, if the establishment's doing its job, it should ask you for your ID to make sure that it matches.
And you should be a legal American citizen to be able to vote in an American election.
Yes.
I mean, common sense. You would think it's common sense.
Yeah. Now, I was going somewhere when I asked you about the, would you say liberals were a little irrational, a little unstable at times? Because I don't know if you've seen this yet. There was a professor at the University of Kansas. I don't know if you've seen this yet, but he was talking about men who don't vote for Kamala Harris because she's a woman. Again, I don't think you should vote for or vote against somebody based on their sex, period.
Sex or race.
I don't think any of that should matter. You should vote for them on policies. But he took it way further. He said, we could line all those guys up and shoot them. Yeah, again, this is a professor at the University of Kansas. He says, what frustrates me is there are going to be some males in our society that will refuse to vote for a potential female president because they don't think females are smart enough to be president. We could line all those guys up and shoot them. They clearly don't understand the way of the world. Of course, I think after he said that, he realized what he had done, because he comes out and says, did I say that? Scratch that from the recording. I don't want the deans hearing that. And with good reason, because he has been placed on administrative leave for saying it.
This is somebody who actually believes in murder. So,
and let's be clear here. I don't think he would have stopped at just men that don't want to vote. I think he would accuse you or I, even though our objections to Kamala Harris have nothing to do with her sex, nothing to do with the color of her skin. It has everything to do with her policies. We're not, look, if you give me a Margaret Thatcher type running for the president of the United States, I can get on board with that.
If Candace Owens was running against Joe Biden, I would vote for Candace Owens.
Absolutely. But for him to come out and say that is a clear example. And he said it on video. He said it on video and then instantly regretted it and asked for it to be scrubbed from the video because he knew he was in trouble when he said it. Here's the statement from the University of Kansas. It says, the university is aware of a classroom video in which an instructor made an inappropriate reference to violence. The instructor is being placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. The instructor offers his sincerest apologies and deeply regrets the situation. His intent was to emphasize the advocacy for women's rights and equality, and he recognizes he did a very poor job in doing so. The university has an established process for situations like this, and we'll follow that process. Well, when you hear that statement that tells you he's on administrative leave, but they'll find a reason to keep him because you notice they're already issuing his apology for them. So he's on administrative leave. He's made to feel uncomfortable for the minute. I have no doubt that the University of Kansas is going to keep him on the staff.
They'll wait for it to blow over and they'll bring him right back.
Probably after the election. Yeah. He'll come back. And again, should he be fired over that if it was an honest misspeak? Maybe, because he's in a classroom with impressionable youth. It's not the same thing as if you or I misspeak when talking to people. He's in a classroom with impressionable youth. I think that it is high past time we start to crack down on these lunatic liberals that are in these classrooms.
Well, let me ask you this, Jack. Imagine a conservative professor saying that black people should be shot if they don't vote for Donald Trump. I mean,
he should be fired.
He's a man. I mean, that's just as bad. It's the same exact thing.
It is.
And yeah, of course he should be fired.
Yeah. I mean, again, while we do an event, what are you investigating? You have the video. There is video evidence here, but we got to investigate it. The investigation is, here's the video. Here's where he said it. Here's where he instantly regretted it because he knows what he said was wrong. That's all you need to go ahead and hammer this right here. But that's the sad reality. Again, we've talked a lot on this show about rhetoric and how things can get out of hand. This is another example of rhetoric getting out of hand. And if you notice, most of the time when the rhetoric goes extreme, it's a liberal. I've talked about this before. I've even acknowledged it when Chris is on here. I've seen some of the private messages that Chris McDaniel gets. I've seen some of the tolerant left and the things that they have said to him. And it's things I cannot repeat on this show because they don't use nice language. Well, and they're not wishing him a good day. They're saying things worse than this. I can take you and show you my inbox, Jack. I've gotten called every name in the book because I write a political conservative column. But it's not just a few lunatics we're talking about. Look what Hillary Clinton said this week. I mean, this is a former first lady, a former secretary of state of this country who's basically wants to do away with the First Amendment. It's incredible. She basically said we're going to lose control if we allow free speech. And that's just as a lunatic statement as this professor made. But she's going to get a free pass as well. Yeah. It's really sad what's going on. There is something completely off with half this nation. I don't know how we fix it because it seems to be being taught from a young age right now. A hatred for the greatest country the world's ever known. And that could be a whole nother topic. Maybe next time Chris is gone, you and I will dive into that because I think that is a great thing to dive into. That's a great topic to sit back and have a discussion about because we're seeing that. We're seeing the slip away here. And it is interesting when you look at how they would handle it if it was a conservative professor that had said something similar. Do you think he'd be getting an investigation? You think they'd publish that he deeply regrets what he said and apologizes? And here's the other thing. He'd be humiliated throughout the country by the mainstream press. Yeah, it wouldn't just be on Breitbart. No, it would be all over the place. The guy would be canceled for the rest of his life and have to go, leave the country. Absolutely. Well, look, we're getting close to wrapping up here, and Chris should be back next week, so we look forward to having Chris back, of course. And Jim, as always, thank you for filling in. You always do a wonderful job here with me. I'm just kind of floating through it when Chris isn't here, but you carry me through a lot of these shows. Well, I appreciate that, Jack, but that's not true. Well, I do want to go ahead and say, folks, that yes, momentum is shifting. It looks like it's looking a lot better for Donald Trump. But when I say that, that doesn't mean that if you're in a battleground state or if you're one of those folks that's able to go to a battleground state and work and try to help these campaigns out, that you should just sit on your hands and rest easy. This is an extremely close race. There's a reason why we won't say we know who's going to win, because we don't. Anybody that tells you right now that they know who's going to win this race is lying to you. They don't know, because this is an extremely close race. Momentum that we have today can be momentum that they have tomorrow. The key to everything is getting out and working, knocking on those doors, making the phone calls that you need to make. That's how you win these races. And you don't just need to focus on the presidential race. You need to focus on those battleground states, on those Senate races, on those House races. Because again, you have to plan for the event that Donald Trump does not win the presidency. If you put all your chips in one basket, you're destined to fail. And that's why you have to focus on the whole broad spectrum and prepare for the worst. But I think, based on what we're seeing right now, things are really looking up for Donald Trump, folks. Guys, this has been Chris McDaniel's America. I'm Jack Fairchild. Thank y'all so much for watching this week. We'll see you again next week.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.